Olivia was new to the neighborhood. Her father's job required it to be so. She was used to this, constantly moving from different neighborhoods, never having consistent friends, having to leave just as she gets comfortable with the environment around her. Yeah, she was used to it. Despite this, it didn't stop her from making new friends. It was something she enjoyed immensely. Olivia loved the idea of learning people of different cultures, religions, countries, or even personalities. The idea of meeting new people and analyzing their personalities is something she has always loved doing. The unsettling atmosphere of the new neighborhood cast a daunting shadow over its streets. Every house occupied its own niche in an eerie, perfectly aligned line of red bricks. Nothing stirred, and not a breath could be heard. The air was heavy with tension and unspoken warnings of an unwelcoming materialism. It felt almost as if you were merely being tolerated by the residents' indifferent stares, and as quickly as you arrived, you wanted to leave behind this perfect world and return to one which embraced life and hope. But of course, Olivia couldn't do this. She would have to get used to it, like she always does. Olivia sighed as she stood in front of their new house, similar to the others in the neighborhood. Tall, dark, lined with perfect red bricks. "How do you like it, Liv?" her father asked from behind her, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. Probably the only warmth she felt since she stepped into this new place. "It's all right, I guess," Olivia replied tentatively. "I'll get used to it." Her father smiled at her and patted her head. "You sure will." She sure did hope, too. It had been about 2 weeks since they had moved in, and nothing particularly interesting had happened. School was normal, neighbors were normal, everything pretty normal until one day a letter showed up on Olivia's study table. Olivia stared at the strange letter on her table. It certainly confused her. There was no stamp, and had what looked like average handwriting for its address. She nervously opened the envelope, not sure of what she would find inside. Her hands shook as she unfolded a piece of paper from within, feeling an eerie chill crawl up her spine as she did so. She soon realized that this letter was meant for her, a mysterious message that shed no light on who sent it or why. The letter said, "I need help. My family is abusing me." Olivia was struck with shock. Who could this be? What family? Why would someone send her a letter for help? She had so many questions, but all she knew for sure was that somebody out there needed help and that she couldn't just ignore it. Strangely, as soon as she looked out of the window, she directly faced a girl from a neighboring house, looking straight into her eyes. She didn't know if it was a coincidence or not, but the girl kept staring at her. She had long dark hair that was in 2 braids, falling in front on her chest. She looked pale and thin, a little bit like a vampire, if Olivia really had to make a comparison. A feeling of unease stirred in Olivia's stomach as she watched the girl, but she abruptly broke eye contact and walked away quickly. Olivia wasn't sure if it was the same girl from the letter, but she knew that someone needed help and that she had to find out who. She decided to investigate a bit further by going door to door in the neighborhood and asking about anyone with family troubles. After some time, she was able to locate the house of a known person, the girl from before. Olivia knocked on their door, and she was welcomed inside by the maid. The house looked different inside than outside. There were no decorations or ornaments like any other household, rather than being empty and devoid of life. As soon as they stepped in, an old woman came into view with a scowl on her face. It was clear that this was the family of the girl who had sent her the letter, or so she assumed, because the old woman seemed to rule with an iron fist and looked like not one person in the house dared to oppose her. Even though she had a scowl on her face, as soon as Olivia came into her view, the woman smiled warmly. "Are you here to see Margaret?" She spoke of a girl named Olivia who had ginger hair. She said she was friends with her. Olivia frowned deeply. Friends? They had never even spoken, except the random sessions of intense staring from each other's windows. Despite this, Olivia decided to go along with it. She had a strange feeling the letter was from the girl in this house, and if she wanted to help, she needed to speak to her. "Oh, yes, we are. May I please see her?" Olivia asked sweetly, a picture-frame smile plastered on her face. "Yes, of course, and pardon my behavior. I am Mrs. Smith. It's lovely to meet you, Olivia," the woman said, her voice kind. Olivia didn't understand how a woman like this could be part of an abusive family. She seemed so warm. She sat at a couch in the hall as Mrs. Smith asked the maid to call for Margaret. "You see, Margaret has always been a quiet one, doesn't make friends. It has worried me and her father for the longest times. She is nothing like her other two siblings, which of course is justified considering the fact that she is adopted." Mrs. Smith laughed nervously. "You must be wondering why I'm saying all of this. I'm just glad the two of you are friends. I don't remember the last time she mentioned anything about Mother," a cold voice said all of a sudden, causing Olivia to jerk her head towards the source of the sound. Before her stood the very Margaret who she was looking for all over. She had her hair in the same way she always does, neatly in two braids with white ribbons, and she was wearing a black dress. She sort of reminded Olivia of a doll. "Ah, here is my Margaret. Now then," Mrs. Smith said as she gestured Olivia to stand up and face her daughter. "You two must have much to talk about. I'll leave you be." Olivia nodded politely and watched as Mrs. Smith left the room, but not before giving one last glance at the two of them, including a smile that seemed both sad and happy at the same time. Only when she was out of sight did Margaret speak again, her voice still cold, but with a hint of something else in it that Olivia could not recognize. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly, without any emotion or feeling in her voice. Olivia was taken aback by her rudeness. "What do I want?" Olivia asked, and then realized she had no basis to say the letter was from Margaret. It was an assumption. "Oh, right." They stood for a while facing each other. "Was it you who kept that letter in my room?" she asked, getting to the point directly. To her surprise, Margaret threw her head back and laughed. For some strange reason, Olivia didn't think she was capable of laughing. It was no ordinary laugh. It made her feel uncomfortable and uneasy. It sounded almost evil. "Yes, it was me," she said before her laughter suddenly stopped. "I never thought you'd actually come here to see me. I'm surprised that you are even talking to me right now." Olivia felt the sudden urge to reach out and hug this girl who seemed so lonely and desperate for friendship, but she resisted, not wanting to make things awkward between them. Margaret's expression changed from coldness to something more sad? Yes, sad was the best word for it. "Is it true what you wrote?" Olivia asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. She couldn't understand this girl. If she was to be very honest, one moment she creeps her out, the other moment she makes her feel sorry for her. The girl looks around the hall, nibbling at her lip, as if she was looking for someone. She looked back at Olivia, her eyes filled with fear. "Come with me?" Olivia obliged and followed her. Margaret took her to a room she supposed was her own. She told Olivia to sit on the bed while she takes a place on her study table, directly facing Olivia, and takes a deep breath. "Yes, it is true," she replied. For some reason, this caused the hair on Olivia's skin to rise. Mrs. Smith seemed so kind. Yet, was she abusive? Or was it the father? Margaret raised her sleeves up and shows wounds all over her arms, cut marks, bruises. Olivia gasped at the sight of it. She was truly not lying. "I'm tired of living like this. I had no one to talk to, and I thought you might understand." She clutched her arms as if trying to calm herself down. "So here I am," she said in a shaky voice, looking at Olivia with desperate eyes. Olivia was speechless. It was the last thing she expected when coming here today. She walked over and hugged Margaret gently, tears streaming down her face. She promised that she'll never let anyone hurt her ever again. Warmth and comfort finally returned to the room, something both of them needed since long ago. She let her go then and asked, "Why don't you tell anyone?" A small smirk crossed Margaret's face. She was so sure she saw it, but it was gone as soon as it came on her face. She placed a hand on her heart and looked down at her feet. "I have no access to any electronic device. I will get beaten if I am seen with one. I can't leave the house on my own. I'm trapped." Olivia held her shoulders and massaged them. She looked directly into Margaret's eyes and said with every ounce of determination within her, "I will help you. I promise." As Olivia got home, she immediately filled her father in the situation. That was something she loved about her father. He always listened to her, no matter what it was. He was sympathetic and understanding, despite the fact this wasn't something he could relate to or even begin to understand. He decided to contact the police, which would eventually be the best decision they ever made. The police visited Margaret's house and questioned her parents thoroughly, taking her away from them for a while. Olivia was also questioned, and so was her father. The police then sent her back home, but asked for a few moments with her father, as they had matters to discuss. Nothing prepared Olivia for what she heard when her father made it home. "It was all an act," he said, placing his cap on the table. He massaged his forehead as Olivia's jaw dropped. "Apparently, the girl, Margaret, has been diagnosed with some mental disorder. It was an act, sending the letter. The police searched through the house thoroughly. There was no sign of it being an abusive household." "They must be mistaken," Olivia interjected, her thoughts muddled. "An act? An act? She was played?" "Calm down, darling. They're not. About the bruises. A medical professional checked it and..." He paused. "They were all self-inflicted injuries. We don't know why she did it, but she seemed to find the entire fiasco quite hilarious because she kept laughing." Olivia gasped. "It makes sense now, actually. When I first went to meet her, she laughed at odd times, smirked when I asked serious questions. It was all really an act, huh?" She collapsed onto the chair beside her father. He wrapped an arm around her. "You did the right thing, love. Don't worry." Olivia wiped a few tears away and nodded. She suddenly felt very foolish for believing the girl's story so easily, getting carried away by her emotions. This incident taught her a valuable lesson: to always question and be vigilant before believing something. It was an expensive lesson to learn, but it would stay with her forever.